Hey there, thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. In this episode, we are looking at Series 2, Episode 12 of Andor, which is the final ever episode of Andor, and probably the final episode of Total Ramblings in which we will be talking about Andor. This episode is entitled Jedha, Kyber, Erso. Basically, if you haven't seen this episode yet, it's the last time I get to make that joke, if you don't want to be spoiled, then I would suggest that you come back to this video after you've gone and watched the episode, because it's fantastic. So anyway, we start off, we are in the safe house on Coruscant, and Claire is remarking that Yavin is a bitter ending for her that she feels. She feels that she'll be there as a prisoner. I'm guessing because the main rebellion and Luthen didn't really see eye to eye, but I'm not really sure where this animosity comes in. Anyway, the ISB, who are desperately trying to contact the TAC team, are in a little bit of a panic because they can't get through. Meanwhile, K2SO has worked his way through the shuttle crew and has basically killed everybody. And the TAC team are still advancing on the safe house door. Melshi pops outside and is immediately lit up by the TAC team. And then he gets out of the spotlights and the TAC team start to move up. Outside, K2SO is busy stomping through the guards. The TAC team throw a stun grenade into the apartment. It looks like one of those thermal detonators that we first saw in Return of the Jedi, so nice continuation of the sort of design there. And basically now we have a shootout, except we have a shootout where K2SO now has a rifle. The ISB back in their ops centre with Major Partagaz are desperately trying to bring more people in, but of course they've released a warrant for Claire's detention, alleging that she has a disease, and so everybody's out looking for her, and they're having trouble bringing assets in to support the TAC team. Supervisor Hirt gets killed quite bluntly by K2SO and is then used as a shield to advance on the last remaining guard who's blasting away with his rifle. So if Hirt wasn't dead already, he is now. Anyway, as I say, the ISB can't get the units in. K2SO successfully manages to kill off the TAC team, and basically as Cassian, Melshi, K2SO and Claire escape in their U-wing, we see kind of Coruscant sort of police units kind of screaming in, but it's far too late. They get back on board the U-wing, and K2SO says, "I assume any doubts about my value have been erased." And Cassian doesn't say anything, and K2SO says, thanks a lot, or something like that. I don't remember the exact line. We then cut to a scene on Yavin base where Mon Mothma and Bail Organa are engaging with Saw Gerrera in a video conference. And Mon is berating Saw for his actions. She knows that he's on Jedha, and he's saying, well, I'm taking action. If only you could fight, because we know that Saw's sort of partisans were a bit more extreme than other rebel cells. And then they get an announcement that there's a U-wing coming in hot. Mon's communication with Saw Gerrera is terminated, and she remarks to Bail that this makes the Senate look easy. As they approach the base, Kay is worried that they'll be shot down, and he says that he plans to tell everybody that he was kidnapped by Andor. And then in a very funny scene, as two X-Wings come in to escort the U-Wing, which they don't know whether it's hostile or not, he looks out the window and waves at them, which is quite nice. Anyway, Claire needs to see a doctor, and Cassian goes off to see Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, tells them all about the information that they've had about Galen Erso. But as we kind of saw in Rogue One with the rebel leadership, they are somewhat skeptical, and they remark that Luthen's been a thorn in their side. Cassian Andor says, well, you know, I don't think you realise how much you owe him. that he says it's insulting to hear Luthen run down by people who have given a fraction of what he sacrificed, because he's dead now. Obviously, he has sacrificed his life in order to stay on Coruscant, engage with his ISB agent Lonnie, and get information, and eventually, of course, get information about the Death Star. But they think Luthen was being played. Anyway, Mon and her cousin Vel have a chat. Mon Mothma wants to believe Andor. Andor, in the meantime, has started getting messages from one of Saw's people on Kafrene, and the message is that he will only speak to Andor. Now, this is the contact that we see right at the beginning of Rogue One. I think it's the contact who reveals the name of the Death Star or the planet killer to Andor, and Andor, to protect the rebellion, and I think shoots the guy, if I remember rightly. Anyway, Vel and Andor have a toast to all their fallen friends, and we have a list of sort of the names of the many people that we've met during these two series. And again, their feelings toward Luthen are somewhat ambiguous because, you know, of the way he sort of used to use people as pawns, I guess. And again, Cassian says, well, Luthen died for this. Does it matter what he did to us along the way? And again, none of this would exist if it wasn't for him. And then we kind of get a voiceover from Nemik. Nemik was a character that we saw in Series 1 who had sort of thoughts about rebellion, and I can't think of the exact word, but kind of wrote a treatise on the subject of rebellion and freedom. And we hear this, and as we hear this, we see Major Partagaz in his sort of control room, pondering his fate, needless to say. And one of his few remaining assistants, supervisors, comes in, and Partagaz says, and it's clear that this isn't just a voiceover. He's actually listening to this treatise. He's actually listening to this speech, and he says to his assistant, "Who do you think it is?" Because they don't know this information, this philosophy, this speech has been released, and nobody actually knows who made the speech. It's of course Nemik. It's Nemik who died in Series 1, and he says to his assistant, it just keeps spreading, doesn't it? And the other guy in the ISB says it's been very hard to contain. And then he says they are waiting for you outside. And Partagaz says, "Do you mind if I have a few moments to collect my thoughts?" Because basically, this whole situation with the revelation of the existence of a super weapon finally getting out to non-Imperials, to rebel agents, is basically a major screw up by the ISB, or rather, they are being made the scapegoats here. And outside, we see two stormtroopers waiting for Major Partagaz. No doubt he's going to end up interrogated, executed, or whatever. But as you might expect, he takes the opportunity to kill himself. Blast a bolt to the head, one could assume. Back on Yavin 4, Vel says that Bix is safe, but she says to him, "Don't wait too long before you go and visit her." And this is kind of the sad bit of this, because this episode, the ending of this episode, leads directly into the start of the Rogue One film. And at the end of Rogue One, spoilers, Cassian Andor dies. And, would he have gone off to meet Bix after this? Well, he's not given the opportunity, basically. Anyway, Andor's back in his room, and he's having a bit of a flashback to his sister on, when they were young. And K2SO wakes him up and says to him, "The man you do not like is here," and it's Bail. It's Bail Organa visiting Andor, and he basically says, "Look, you've got this contact on Kafrene wanting to talk to you. We'd like you to go and meet him." And Andor sort of says, "Well, why have you suddenly changed your story?" And Bail says, "Well, if we die fighting the Empire, I want to go down swinging." And then he says, as Andor prepares to leave, "May the Force be with you." So basically, Andor gets dressed in the gear that we're going to see him at the beginning of the Rogue One film. And he's walking through the base, and we see Melshi training the troops, and we see Mon Mothma eating with the troops. We have a brief cut to Mon Mothma's husband, Perrin, who is in a taxi or a limousine on Coruscant, and he appears to be with the mother of his son-in-law, presumably spreading his seed, shall we say. Interesting. Claire appears to accept where she is now and what she's done, and perhaps in maybe one of the most satisfying turn of events, albeit I would imagine quite painful for her, we see Dedra Meero in prison, in a prison facility, crying. It's the same type of prison facility that Andor was in Series 1, where they had electrified floors, no privacy, and where they were being forced to construct mysterious components, which we later found out were for the Death Star. So basically, she has been forced into a life of servitude. So all that she did for the Empire, her absolute fanaticism, has got her to prison, basically. And she is there crying for herself. That's how she ends up. Kind of poetic there, really. We then kind of get like whilst Andor's walking towards his ship, we're getting like a run through of all the characters, all the pieces, if you like, set up, ready to go for Rogue One. So Saw Gerrera is waiting on the planet Jedha, where he's been causing problems, and there's now an Imperial Star Destroyer above Jedha City. We see Director Krennic looking upon his Death Star. It's yet to have the dish installed, because we see that being installed in the Rogue One film. And Andor is heading off to the Ring of Kafrene, which is, as I say, which is the first place we see him in Rogue One. And then in a lovely scene, one that's been rumoured, we see Bimo, the droid, playing with another droid back on that agricultural planet where Brasso, Wilmon, Andor and Bix were staying. So it's nice to see that, and Bix is there, so it's nice to see that Bimo has a friend, and because he's a very... he worries a lot, does Bimo, and he's playing with another droid, so he has another friend. And as has been rumoured, Bix has a baby. Bix, it was rumoured, left Andor because she was pregnant, and she didn't want to take him away from the rebellion where he was needed, but presumably wanted to bring up her child in a safe environment, and she has Andor's child. And that is how we end Andor. We have all the pieces in place for the Rogue One movie, and it's a very bittersweet ending, because we know what ultimately happens to Andor, and we know what ultimately happens following Rogue One, and then we're into the main Star Wars movies. The first Star Wars film happens straight after Rogue One, so now we have a prequel to the prequel, if you like. And I can't praise this series enough, and I am both sad and upset that it is finished, but it's finished in the right way. Originally, I think they wanted to do 5 series, and they wanted, each series wanted to be a year in Andor's life, and basically they either couldn't afford to do that, or people weren't prepared to commit to 5 series. So the first series was like 1 year, and the second series has been 4 years, with the 3 episode blocks each being a year. And I can't think of a better way of doing it, really. The whole thing about the Andor series has been that we've seen real threat introduced in the form of the Empire. In Series 1, for example, we saw how threatening a single TIE fighter could be to people on the ground. And yet, but when we see sort of space battles, we see TIE fighters getting blown up left, right and centre, and it kind of diminishes the threat to a degree. But in Series 1, we see TIE fighters, a single TIE fighter can be such a massive threat. We see the lengths that people have to go to maintain subterfuge and to undermine an empire, basically, and the different routes that people take to rebellion, how ruthless people have to be to sort of eliminate kind of loose loose ends, that kind of thing. We met Luthen and Cassian Andor, who have different ways of doing things, and yet they're united together. We see Mon Mothma with her own method of rebellion. It's just been such a major, massive insight into the background of Star Wars, seeing worlds that we've never seen before, seeing the lengths that the Empire will go to either displace or eliminate native people from their lands in order to achieve their aims. And as I say, we see the ISB doing their mysterious dirty work, and how even the most fanatical Imperial will get caught up and gets dragged down along with it because of the suspicion and the internal infighting that happens. Major Partagaz, isn't around anymore. Everybody kind of suffers in this, and it's just kind of, it's like you see Dedra Meero in the whole series, clearly fanatical about what she's doing, but she never looks happy. And you have to wonder, what's the point if you're not happy? I've said this many, many times. This is gutter level Star Wars. It's about people trying to survive the Empire. We hear a lot about the Emperor, but we've never seen him in this. We've never seen Darth Vader. We've never seen a Sith or a Jedi. We've met a Force healer who's one of the people that sees Andor as he leaves for his mission, because, she can kind of see the Force sort of coalescing around him, if you like, because of his importance. But we don't always need to see lightsabers and Jedi and stuff like that. This is about regular people trying to survive. Regular people at different strata of the lowest levels in society up to the highest, with the senators and their different ways of coping and rebelling against the Empire. And I have to say, it adds so much to the Star Wars lore. And it's kind of like in Star Wars, the original Star Wars, we're just kind of told that the Empire is evil. Later on, we see them blow up Alderaan, and okay, right, they're evil. But we're told from the outset how evil they are. Here, in this series, you can see how evil the entire organisation is. That, a corrupt fascist government comes to power, and all the people, all the hangers-on, all the people who want their little bit of power, they all come out of the woodwork. Like Captain Kado, for example. I've no doubt he would probably be some street thug if he wasn't in the Imperial army, but he's given the opportunity here to oppress people and to beat people down and to just generally be nasty. And that's kind of what we see in reality. It's like with the Nazis, people who just like beating up other people would join the Nazi party, would become a brown shirt, would join the SS, because, it made them kind of feel like they belonged. And it's kind of, you get that impression with the Empire, and you see how evil they are to achieve their aims. And ultimately, of course, this is all down to a Force-using Sith Lord who has corrupted the galaxy and perverted its institutions in his own image. He doesn't care about the individuals. He doesn't care that Dedra Meero, who was a fanatical follower of the Empire, is now locked away in prison. He just wanted to build his Death Star and rule by fear and terror and force. And everyone who gets sucked up, they don't see the bigger picture. They don't see how they've all been manipulated, including the members of the Empire themselves, including the Imperials. They've all been manipulated. And it kind of brings the rebellion to life, really, because now you can, not that you couldn't before, but now this really brings home why there is a rebellion, why people are rebelling, what they're rebelling against. Really brings that to life, really does, in my opinion, and makes the Empire look so much more sinister. Stormtroopers who can actually shoot, believe it or not. When the sequel trilogy came out, so I've seen The Force Awakens twice, once at the cinema, once at home. I saw The Last Jedi once at the cinema, and I've not seen the last one, Rise of Skywalker. I've not seen it. I thought they were trash. But before The Force Awakens came out, I'll probably lose some viewers because of that. Before The Force Awakens came out, I was really hoping that we would see stormtroopers who could shoot straight. And these guys couldn't. But in Andor, it's brought terror and fear back, and we see all these different strata and different types of Imperial soldiers and troopers and agencies, and they're a real threat. They're a real threat in this. They're not just cannon fodder. Like I said earlier, a single TIE fighter, a single stormtrooper, you know, it's just kind of, this is what Star Wars should be. I'm not saying there isn't a place for lightsabers and Jedi and Sith. Absolutely there is. And that stuff is also brilliant, but it's also fantastic to see Star Wars from, as I say, from gutter level looking up, and how regular people cope and survive. And this series has just been utterly, utterly brilliant. I'm so glad it exists, and I'm so glad that I've been around to see it. As a child who saw Star Wars in the cinema in 1977 when I was 6 years old, this is the stuff of dreams, living and existing in this universe. Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about Andor. I hope to see you in the next episode of Total Ramblings. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. It could be a Doctor Who episode review. I don't know. But I am upset that Andor has finished. But I am so, so, so glad that it exists. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.